Welcome to Almost Alone. Tonight we're doing something a little different. One story, no breaks, no second narrator, just one account, told from beginning to end, given the space it deserves. The person who shared this was 16 when it happened. She's 19 now. She agreed to tell it because, in her words, she wanted someone to understand what it actually feels like. Not the incident itself, but what it does to you afterward. How it rewires the way you move through the world. This story doesn't involve a weapon. It doesn't involve a stranger in a mask or a dark alley or any of the things we've been trained to recognize as dangerous. It starts on a beach, on a family vacation, on a bright July afternoon with the sun out and people everywhere. It starts with a man standing at the waterline, just standing there. If you're new here, welcome. This channel is built around true accounts of real danger, the kind that doesn't announce itself, the kind that sits at the edge of ordinary life and waits for the right moment. No jump scares, no theatrics, just the stories people carry. If tonight's episode stays with you, consider subscribing. And if you have your own story, something that happened that you've never quite been able to explain to anyone, the link to submit is in the description. Now, turn the lights down if you want. This one takes a little while to get where it's going, but it gets there. I'm 19 now. Before I go to bed, I check the front door, the lock, the deadbolt, the chain. I press my shoulder against it the way you'd press against something you weren't sure would hold. Then the back door. Then every window on the ground floor, moving clockwise so I never lose track of where I've been. I keep a flashlight on the nightstand. I keep my phone face up so I can reach it without looking. Most nights, the whole thing takes about 4 minutes. Some nights I do it twice. My therapist calls it a coping mechanism. A way of exerting control over an environment when you've been made to feel like that control can be taken from you. She's not wrong, but she also doesn't know about the piece of paper in my desk drawer, the one with his release date written on it. I've been counting down to it for 2 years. Every morning I think about it before I think about anything else. And every night when I do the walkthrough, front door, back door, windows, clockwise, I think about the fact that in a few months, he'll be out there somewhere, and I won't know where. I've tried to explain to people what that feels like. Most of them nod in a way that tells me they understand the words, but not the weight of them. They don't understand that for me it lives in my chest like something with its own heartbeat, that no amount of time has made the flashlight on the nightstand feel unnecessary. There's something else I haven't told my therapist. Something I've been sitting with for almost 3 years now, and I'm not sure I have the language for it yet. Since this happened, I can't fully trust my own instincts anymore. I'll be in a grocery store, a parking lot, anywhere with strangers, and someone will hold eye contact a second too long, or stand a little too close, or look up from their phone in a way that feels deliberate. And I can't tell. I can't tell if what I'm sensing is real or if he rewired something in me so permanently that ordinary life just looks like threat now. That's what I actually lost. Not just the feeling of safety, the ability to feel safe when I actually am. This happened when I was 16. My family vacationed every summer on the same stretch of the Florida East Coast. One of those tourist beach towns that fills up from Memorial Day through Labor Day with families dragging coolers across burning asphalt. The kind of place where everything smells like sunscreen and salt water and fried food. Where rental golf carts clog the main road by mid-morning, and nobody knows anybody, and nobody is looking too hard at who belongs. Busy enough that nobody notices you. Seasonal enough that nobody asks. We'd been going since I was small enough to be carried on my dad's shoulders into the surf. Every year, the same house, the same stretch of beach, the same ice cream place with the soft serve machine that dripped before you could stop it. That summer it was me, my mom, my dad, and my younger sister Casey, who had just turned 11. We rented the same pale yellow two-story we'd rented for 6 years, 3 blocks from the water, screened porch out back, ceiling fans in every room that made a slow, drowsy sound, but never quite cooled you down, and a kitchen drawer that stuck whenever the humidity spiked, which in July on the Florida coast meant constantly. It felt like the most familiar place in the world. I know now that familiarity can be a kind of blindness, that the places we think we know best are sometimes the ones we're least prepared to see clearly. The first day on the beach, I noticed him. I want to be careful about how I say that, because there was nothing dramatic about it. No moment where something in me went cold. It was subtler, the way you sometimes become aware of a sound in a room before you've consciously registered that you're hearing it. That low, pre-verbal sense that something in your field of attention doesn't belong. We'd been on the beach for maybe an hour. My parents were set up in their usual chairs, just back from the high tide line. My dad with a book he wasn't really reading, and my mom with the crossword she finished in 40 minutes every year, and then complained wasn't hard enough. Casey was down at the water with her boogie board. I was in my chair with my phone and my earbuds, half listening to music, half watching the beach the way you do when you've been somewhere so many times it barely registers anymore. He was at the waterline, maybe 40 feet down the beach from where we'd set up. Average height, average build, somewhere between 30 and 40. Dark swim trunks, baseball cap, sunglasses he couldn't be seen through from where I was sitting. Nothing about him would have made me look twice in any other context, except that he was looking at me, not glancing. Not the casual half-second eye contact you make with strangers on a crowded beach, where both of you look away without registering it. Looking. The sustained kind. The kind where you notice it and wait for it to end, and it doesn't end, and you begin to feel the specific discomfort of being watched by someone who isn't going to look away just because you've noticed. I shifted in my chair, turned toward Casey at the water. When I turned back, he was still facing the same direction. I told myself I was probably wrong, that I was 16 and self-conscious, and the angle of the light was making it look like he was looking at me when he was looking at something else. Men on beaches stare into the middle distance. It doesn't have to mean anything. I put my earbud back in. But even with my eyes on my phone, I was aware of him the way you're aware of a sound you can't locate. That low, persistent frequency. Something your nervous system has registered, even though your conscious mind is still building a reasonable explanation for it. Eventually, I looked up again. He was still there. Still positioned the same way. Not swimming, not reading, not doing any of the things a person normally does at a beach on a hot afternoon. Just standing there. I watched him for 30 seconds. Long enough to be sure I wasn't imagining the direction of his attention. Then I turned my chair toward the water and spent the rest of the afternoon with my back to that part of the beach. That night at dinner, I brought it up, not dramatically, not with any particular alarm in my voice. More like mentioning something that was still sitting wrong, something I couldn't shake even after the drive back to the house and the outdoor shower and the cold drinks on the porch, even after everything that makes up the normal texture of a beach vacation day. My dad looked up from his menu. Where on the beach was this? I described it. The spot, the direction he'd been facing, how long it had seemed to go on. My mom reached across the table and touched my arm. We'll keep an eye out tomorrow, she said. Stay close to us while we're on the beach, okay? Just to be safe. My dad nodded. If you see him again, come get me right away. Don't wait. I want to be clear about that dinner because I've spent a lot of time thinking about it. They didn't dismiss me. They didn't tell me I was being dramatic or paranoid or that I was reading too much into a stranger's glance. They heard what I said, and they responded to it the way attentive parents respond to something that sounds uncomfortable but not yet dangerous. The problem is that's exactly what it was designed to look like. Not dangerous, not threatening, not something you could point to and say, this is a problem I need to solve right now. Just a little off, just enough to register and not enough to act on, sitting at the exact threshold where reasonable people say, keep an eye out, and leave it at that. He understood that threshold. I understand now that he'd spent years learning exactly where it was. The second day on the beach, he was back. Farther down the shoreline, maybe 70 yards, but with the same orientation. That same quality of stillness that wasn't relaxation, wasn't daydreaming, wasn't any of the ways people are still when they're just existing in a place. It was the stillness of attention. I watched him for a few minutes before saying anything. Part of me still wanted to find a way to explain it. Tourists return to the same beach. People have routines. Maybe he just liked this stretch of shoreline, and I happened to be near his spot 2 days running. I know how that sounds now. I knew how it sounded even then, underneath the part of me still working on a reasonable explanation. I nudged my dad without pointing. He stood up slowly. The way you stand when you don't want to look like you're standing for a reason. He stretched, adjusted his sunglasses, walked casually toward the water, angled toward the man, at the relaxed pace of someone who just wanted to get his feet wet. I watched him stop about halfway down, look, stay there for a moment, then turn around and come back. He sat down quietly. Could be he's just someone who people watches, he said. Hard to know exactly who someone's looking at out here. He was there yesterday, I said. Same thing. He didn't move for as long as I was watching. I know. He kept his voice even, the way he does when he's working to stay calm for my benefit. Let's pack up early. Give him nothing to look at. We went to a mini golf place up the main road. Casey cheated on the back nine, and everyone pretended not to notice. By the time we were back at the house with the sun going down, I'd almost talked myself into believing it was nothing. Almost. The third day, we went to the beach earlier than usual. Out the door by 9, before the full summer heat settled in. I found him within 20 minutes. He wasn't at the waterline this time. He was higher up, near the dunes, in the sparse stretch of sand between the public access path and the sea oats. The beach was still mostly empty at that hour. Just a few early risers spread out across the sand, and him standing at the edge of the dune line. Closer than he'd been either of the previous days. Close enough that I could see the set of his shoulders, the way he was angled. He wasn't looking at the water. I didn't say anything. I just reached over and found my mom's hand on the arm of her chair and held it. She looked at me, then looked where I was looking, and her face did something I'd never seen it do before. Not panic. Something quieter and more controlled than that. The kind of expression that means a person has just understood something they didn't understand a moment ago and is deciding how to respond without alarming the people around them. She squeezed my hand once, leaned toward my dad. He was moving toward the dunes within 30 seconds. Same studied casualness, same relaxed pace. I watched him walk up the beach toward the man. I watched the man watch him coming. And then, before my dad was close enough to speak, the man turned and walked calmly up and over the dune path, disappearing into the sparse scrub on the other side. By the time my dad reached the spot, there was nobody there. He stood in the empty space for a moment, looking at the ground. Then he crouched down. When he came back, his jaw was tight in a way I'd never seen before. He didn't make eye contact with me right away. He was gone by the time I got there, he said. But the sand at the base of the dune, there's an impression there, like someone standing in the same place for a long time. He paused. He wasn't just passing through. We packed up and left. That night, he called the non-emergency police line, described everything systematically: the 3 days, the positions, the proximity, the fact that the man appeared before we arrived and hadn't moved while we watched. He was polite and thorough. The officer on the other end told my dad the truth. A man standing on a public beach wasn't a crime. Without a direct interaction or a verbal threat, there was nothing to file. Be aware of your surroundings. Call immediately if he approaches. My dad thanked him and sat at the kitchen table for a moment without saying anything. We drove 20 minutes north the following morning to a quieter stretch of shoreline. Smaller, less commercial. I sat with my back to the dunes the entire time. For the first time since we'd arrived, I didn't scan the waterline every few minutes. Casey buried my feet in the sand and sculpted mermaid fins around my ankles and took a photo, and I laughed at something she said, and for a little while, I felt like myself again, like a 16-year-old on a summer vacation with nothing more complicated to think about than how badly her feet were going to itch when the sand dried. I thought, maybe it was over. I should tell you about the drive back. Late afternoon, the sun dropping, the light going that particular gold that happens in the hour before sunset on the Florida coast, the kind that makes everything look warmer and safer than it actually is. We were about 2 blocks from the house when I saw the car. A dark sedan parked on the street half a block from our house. Engine off. Not in a driveway. Just at the curb on a residential street where people either parked in their own driveway or in front of their own house. It wouldn't have registered to most people, but I'd been watching for 3 days. Whatever part of the brain keeps score of things that don't belong had been running quietly underneath everything else, cataloging without my permission. I looked at the car. The man behind the wheel was looking at ours, not at his phone, not at the road, at our car specifically, as we turned onto the block. And when I looked directly at him, not a glance, but a full look, the way you look at someone when you want them to know you see them. He didn't look away. No embarrassment, no startled reflex, just the same stillness I'd watched on the beach for 3 days, patient, unbothered, like being caught was a thing that happened to other people. He held my gaze until my dad pulled into the driveway and the sight line broke. I put my hand on my dad's arm from the back seat. He saw it. His hands tightened slightly on the wheel before he kept driving, pulling into the driveway with the careful calm of someone who doesn't want to give anything away. He got us inside, told my mom to stay with us, and walked back down the street. The car was gone by the time he reached the corner. He came back and stood in the front hall with his hand still on the deadbolt. "Did you get a plate?" my mom asked. "Partial," he said. "Not enough." They talked behind their closed bedroom door for a long time that night. The careful, controlled murmur of 2 people working through something they didn't want their children to hear. Casey fell asleep easily. 11-year-olds are still close enough to genuine security that they can sleep through the kind of tension that keeps adults awake. I was not that close anymore. I lay on my back and listened to the ceiling fan and the ocean 2 blocks away. A sound I'd fallen asleep to every summer of my life, a sound that had always meant safety and the best version of things. And I tried to convince myself that locked doors meant being safe. The house felt different than it had the night before. The same rooms, the same furniture, the same stuck kitchen drawer, but something had shifted in the quality of the darkness. The screen porch that had always felt like an extension of the house now felt like a threshold. The ground floor windows that had just been windows now felt like the places where outside and inside were closest to each other. I didn't have the language for it yet. Nobody said out loud what all of us were thinking, that he knew which house was ours. We stayed off the beach the next 2 days. My mom kept us moving. The aquarium, shopping, dinner somewhere across the bridge on the mainland where the parking lot was bright and full. Anywhere public, anywhere with people, anywhere that wasn't the rental house or the quiet residential streets of our end of the island. My dad called the non-emergency line again with more detail. The car, the partial plate, the fact that the man appeared to know where we were staying. The officer said he'd have a patrol car drive through the area. It did. I saw it from the porch one evening, moving slowly down our street, flashlights sweeping driveways and yards as it passed. It made me feel better for about 20 minutes. Then I started thinking about all the hours between patrols. The first night off the beach, I couldn't sleep. Sometime around midnight, I heard something outside my window. A soft sound, something shifting in the bushes below the sill. And my body went completely rigid before my brain had processed anything at all. I lay there, not breathing, for what felt like 5 full minutes. Nothing else came. Eventually, I convinced myself it was an animal, a cat, or the wind moving through the hedge. I finally fell asleep around 2. By the second day off the beach, I'd started to breathe a little easier. 2 days without seeing him. Maybe the patrol car had been enough. Maybe he'd moved on. I needed to believe something. That was a mistake. I woke up at 2 in the morning, not gradually, not from a dream. The way you wake when something is already registered in the part of your brain that doesn't sleep. The part that's been listening to the house while the rest of you was under and has decided you need to know about something. I lay still. The room was dark. The ceiling fan turned. Casey was asleep in the other bed, completely undisturbed. The house was quiet. I waited. Then I heard it. A sound from outside the wall near my window. Soft, careful. The sound of something moving against the exterior of the house with intention behind it. Not a branch, not old wood settling in the heat. Something controlled. Something trying not to be heard. A scrape. A pause. Another scrape. My heart was already running. I kept my eyes on the ceiling and didn't move. And then something else registered. Something I hadn't noticed until that moment. Something that had probably been there since before I woke. A smell. Faint, coming through the mesh of the screen. Something human and close. Sweat and something underneath it. Particular quality of outdoor air that didn't belong inside the room. He hadn't just arrived. He'd been outside that window before I woke up. I was thinking about that when the sound came again. Lower, more deliberate. The careful probing pressure of something testing the window frame, learning how it was built, finding where it gave. Then the screen made a sound, a dry, quiet pop. The sound of a frame releasing from its track. I screamed. Not a decision. It came out of me before I could think, full and formless and beyond my control. A sound I didn't know I was capable of producing until I heard it filling the room. Casey jolted upright. The hallway lit up. My dad's footsteps, fast. My mom's voice behind him. And outside, someone moving fast, not careful anymore, running. My dad appeared in the doorway, 1 second looking at us, long enough to confirm we were upright and nothing had happened yet. "Call 911, he said. "Stay with them." He grabbed the 9-iron he'd leaned against the hallway wall when we'd arrived. He'd brought it for the little par 3 course 2 blocks from the boardwalk, something I'd rolled my eyes at when I saw him packing it, something that had seemed completely unnecessary for a beach vacation. The 7-iron was still in the bag by the front door, where he'd left it when we unpacked. He went out the front door with the 9-iron. My mom already had her phone out. She was dialing before the door finished closing. What happened in the next few minutes I've reconstructed from sounds through walls and from what my parents told me afterward. I wasn't there directly. I was in the bedroom with Casey and my mom, and a locked door between me and everything happening outside. But I heard it. My dad's voice, low and hard, a tone I hadn't known existed in him, the tone of someone who has moved past fear into something with no room for it. Then another voice, rough, cornered. Then the crash of the porch furniture going over, something hitting the railing hard, the grunting effort of two people on each other. My mom was on with 911, her voice completely flat and steady, a calm so absolute it cost her something. She gave the address. She answered every question in the same even tone, her free hand on Casey's back. Then the sounds from outside changed. My dad's breathing shifted, and the quality of the struggle moved in a direction that told me without anyone saying a word that he was losing. My mom heard it too. She looked around the room, picked up the 7-iron from the bag by the front door, told me quietly to lock the door behind her and not open it for anyone but her or my dad. She walked outside. I locked the door. I pressed my back against it. Casey was right beside me, and I reached over and took her hand. I want to tell you about those next moments because they're the part people don't understand when I try to describe this. They want to hear about the beach and the break-in and the fight. Those are the events. But what I actually live with is standing against that door with my sister's hand in mine, listening to sounds I couldn't stop. The sounds that came through were ugly and human, effort and pain and desperation with no shape to it. I could hear my dad. I could hear him losing. Then my mom's voice cut through, not screaming, not pleading. Something stripped of everything except the most ferocious thing a person can be when someone they love is in danger. Then the crack of the golf club. Then silence. I stood at the door with Casey's hand in mine, and I did not breathe. My mom's voice came through a moment later. He's down. Tell them he's down and we have him. I relayed it to the dispatcher. Officers were 3 minutes out. 3 minutes. I stood at that door and thought about what 3 minutes meant, how it was a unit of time I had always understood abstractly, a pop song, water boiling, nothing, and how right now it was something I couldn't find the edges of, every second inside it carrying weight I couldn't put down. My dad's voice came through the door. I'm okay. Ragged, breathless, but there. Don't come out, my mom said immediately. Casey tightened her grip on my hand. We waited. When I heard the sirens, I cracked the door. The police arrived to find my dad kneeling on the man's back, both hands pinning his wrists to the porch boards, his weight keeping him down. My mom was standing 2 feet away with the 7-iron still in her hands, watching him with the focused, unblinking attention of someone who is not entirely sure the situation is finished. The man was conscious. He wasn't moving. My dad had a split lip, a gash on his forearm, and a bruised rib that we wouldn't fully know about until the next morning when he could barely take a deep breath. My mom had a cut along her forearm from the splintered porch railing that needed 4 stitches. The man had a dislocated shoulder. One officer said something quiet to his partner when he came through the gate and saw my mom standing there with the club. I didn't catch the words. I understood from the way both of them looked at her that it was something close to respect. They cuffed him and put him in the back of the patrol car. A second unit arrived. An officer came inside and stayed with Casey and me, asking questions in a calm, even voice, keeping us in the factual and the present. I sat on the couch in the living room of that pale yellow house I'd known for 6 years. I felt like I was inside a place I'd never been. A detective called my parents a few days later after we'd gone home and the statements had been given. 37 years old, lived 40 minutes inland, worked a regular job. No criminal record that would have shown up in a background check, no history that would have flagged him to anyone who didn't know where to look. But the detective knew where to look. 2 prior cases, 1 trespassing conviction, 1 stalking charge. Both resolved with plea agreements and no prison time. Cases that had been documented and closed without anyone connecting them into the pattern they represented. A history of selecting young women in public places, beaches, parks, shopping areas, and observing them over time, learning their routines, learning the places they felt safe. Then the detective told us one more thing. When they'd searched his car that night, they found his phone. On it were photographs, taken on our beach from a distance over the course of those 3 days. Not of the beach, not of the crowds, of me. The detective said there were 14 of them, all taken from the waterline, from the dune line, from different angles and distances, but every single one the same subject. Same girl, same target. He'd been building a file. I don't know why that detail is the one that still makes my hands shake when I think about it. Maybe because the watching had felt abstract enough to question. The photographs made it concrete, made it deliberate, made it clear that I was never a random choice. He had never broken into a house before. The detective said that sentence carefully, deliberately, in a way that told me he needed us to understand exactly what he meant by it. Escalation. He'd been escalating. The watching had become following. The following had become coming to the house. Coming to the house had become coming to the house in the middle of the night with his hands on the window screen. The detective said the trajectory was consistent with cases where it kept going. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The man got 4 years. With good behavior, he served 2.5. He'll be out in 11 weeks. I know because I looked it up. I checked the registry the way some people check the weather. Not because I expect it to change, but because I need the concrete fact of it in front of me to keep the shapeless fear from expanding into something unmanageable. My therapist knows about the monitoring. She asks good questions. I don't have answers that satisfy either of us. What I have is a piece of paper in my desk drawer and a walk-through routine that takes 4 minutes and sometimes happens twice. Casey is 14 now. Still funny, still sharp, still occasionally falls asleep on the couch in the middle of the afternoon the way she did when she was little. I find that inexplicably reassuring. When I've brought up that vacation, carefully, she says most of it is blurry, that she was half asleep when everything happened, that the earlier part, the beach, the mini-golf, is still clear and good and untouched. I'm glad for that. I'm glad she got to keep it clean. I haven't been back to that stretch of coast. I haven't been to any beach since. The ocean doesn't feel like it used to feel. I don't know if it ever will. People tell me I can't let it define me. That healing means reclaiming the things that were taken, not building a life around their absence. I don't disagree. But they weren't there. They didn't stand at that waterline on the first morning and feel that wrongness they couldn't name. They didn't watch their dad walk toward a stranger on a beach and feel the stranger turn and disappear before anything could be done. They didn't lie awake in the dark of a familiar house and tell themselves that locked doors meant safety. They didn't hear what came through that door. They didn't stand there calculating 3 minutes. He stood on that beach and watched me for 3 days before I understood what was happening. He followed us home. He came back in the middle of the night and put his hands on my window. And in 11 weeks, a door is going to open somewhere in this state, and someone is going to hand him back his shoes and his wallet and his freedom, and he is going to walk out into the same world I live in. I check the locks. I do the walkthrough. I keep the flashlight on the nightstand, and I count down the days, because somewhere out there, so does he. That's where she left it. Not with resolution, not with closure, not with the kind of ending where the threat is neutralized and the world goes back to feeling safe. Just a door opening somewhere, a man walking out, and a 19-year-old checking her locks in the dark, counting down to something she can't stop. The thing that stays with me about this story isn't the break-in. It isn't the fight on the porch or the arrest or even the photographs on his phone. Though that detail has a weight to it I haven't been able to put down. It's the beach. It's the fact that it started in the most ordinary place imaginable, in broad daylight, surrounded by people, that it looked like nothing for 3 full days, that every reasonable explanation she reached for turned out to be wrong, and by the time she knew that for certain, he already knew which house was hers. There's no lesson here that changes what happened. No checklist that would have made it clean. Just the reminder that the people who mean harm have spent a lot of time learning how to look like they don't. Stay aware out there. If tonight's episode resonated with you, a like or a subscription helps more people find the channel. And if you have a story of your own, something that still doesn't sit right, something you've never fully told, the link to share it is in the description. Thank you for listening to Almost Alone. I'll see you in the next one.